All right. What's going on, everybody? My name is Michael Hoff, part of the Face of Sports Network, and here I'm going to give you three quarterbacks to start, three to sit in week 6 of the NFL season. Let's just jump right into it. The first quarterback I'm going to go with is going to be Mr. Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. It's a hell of a town. It started off slow for Caleb. He had less than 10 points in his first two games, in each of his first two games. Since then, he's kind of woken up a little bit. Since that time, he's averaged 20.4 points. Last week, he finished as the QB5 in week 5. Now he's going to go up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And let me tell you something about the Jaguars. The Jaguars, they've allowed 20 or more fantasy points to quarterbacks in 4 games this year. That's more than any other team. Teams that have faced the Jacksonville Jaguars, their quarterback is finished in fantasy football rankings 6th, 12th, 2nd, 5th, 4th. So you've got all of those quarterbacks but one finishing inside the top 10. And the one that didn't was 12. So you like the QB 12. QB 12 is nice, especially if you're in a 12-team league and your quarterback scoring in the top 12, you're probably having a good week. So I like Caleb Williams in this matchup. I think it's a good opportunity for him to continue his resume, a little bit of a resurrection from the first 2 weeks. I think a lot of people are getting hot and bothered, understandably so, by Jaden Daniels. But, Caleb Williams has a lot to give, and I think we're going to see more of that this weekend. The other quarterback I'm going to go with, I'm going to say inside the NFC, and I'm going to go with Mr. Captain Kirk Cousins. This was another one. Started slow, mainly in week 1. We were worried all the hell with the way that he was planting off of that back foot, trying to throw. Well, he's turned it around a little bit, especially this past week. Week 5 on Thursday Night Football against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he threw for 509 yards and 4 touchdown passes. That his performance in week 5 was 1.7 points shy of what he did through the first 4 weeks combined. Think about that. His output in 1 week was 1.7 points shy, or 1.7 points more than what he did through the first 4 weeks. So Kirk Cousins appears to finally be catching steam, what we all thought would happen in this offense. Up next for Cousins is the Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers right now are 6th in points allowed to the quarterback position. They also have allowed 20 plus points to the quarterback position in 3 weeks this season. So to me, this bodes very well for Kirk Cousins to get on a trend where we saw a trend of disappointment to start the year. This might be the trend to start some productivity. So let's sign up for that. I'm going to go with one other start quarterback, and I'm going to say in the NFC South on this one. So all 3 of my star quarterbacks all reside in the NFC. But my last one, last but not least, the elder of the group in which I'm nominating is Mr. Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Listen, he had a rough week 5, but if you paid attention to this show, we told you it was going to be a rough week 5. We didn't sugarcoat it. We said it was going to be a problem. He was going up against a Bears defense that was allowing 9.55 points to the quarterback position. Not great, Bob. Now he's going up against a Falcons defense that is allowing 29.58 points to the quarterback position, 7th most in the league. There's the other thing here. There's a potential for a shootout in this one. I know everybody's looking, if you're just looking blank at the games and not really looking into them, you just see Panthers, Falcons, you think, oh, geez, this one's going to be a snooze fest. No. This one's going to have points. Right now, the Panthers are 1st in the league in allowing 33 points per game. The Falcons, they're 12th with allowing 23. Point being, this is a prime opportunity for Andy Dalton to find himself in a shootout. Andy Dalton is going to be the starter for the Carolina Panthers for a little bit, right? Eventually, that star is going to fade, understandably so, but it's not going to fade in week 6. And in this shootout, you have a prime opportunity to take advantage of Andy Dalton. Now, listen, the other thing to keep in mind here as we go through these options, You might be in a 2 quarterback league. You might be in a quarterback league where you're up against it with the bye weeks. We've got 4 teams on bye this week. Maybe one of those guys is your quarterback. Maybe Andy Dalton's out there waiting for you. You can go ahead and take a shot at him. I don't hate it. Matter of fact, I love it, actually. Matter of fact. But listen, we've done our sits. We've had a good time with them. We're going with Caleb Williams. We're going with Kirk Cousins. We're going with Andy Dalton. Let's give you some of the bad news, unfortunately. This can't all be great. We're going to give you a couple sit options. And one of those for me is going to be Mr. Trevor Lawrence. I mean, Lawrence finally woke up in week 5, his first 20-point game of the season. I would say don't get too comfortable. And why? The Jaguars are going up against the same team that faced Andy Dalton last week, the Chicago Bears. And the Chicago Bears have been, early on in the season, I said surprisingly well. At this point, we're heading into week 6. This shouldn't be surprising anymore. If you're paying attention, you should just know the Bears are good against the quarterback position. And I mean, right now, this Bears defense, they've had 3 games where they have allowed less than 10 fantasy points to the quarterback position. I think better days are going to be ahead for Trevor Lawrence and for this Jaguars offense. I think we see a little bit of a bump in the road this week going up against the Chicago Bears. So one of my sit options is going to be Mr. Trevor Lawrence. As I get into my second sit option, I want to remind you, fine folks, to be sure to like, subscribe to this fine program, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified every single time we go live. Last but not least, go to fffaceoff.com for all of your fantasy football, NFL, sports betting needs. My next quarterback, and listen, this is one of those things when I talk about Trevor Lawrence. So you might be sitting in a league where it's 1 quarterback, maybe it's 2 quarterbacks, maybe you're up against it with bye weeks. So maybe, not all of you, but maybe some of you may be thinking about this. And I'm telling you that if you are, Bo Nix is a quarterback of the Denver Broncos, in which you should be sitting in week 6, going up against the Chargers. Last week, the Broncos rookie had his first game with 20-plus points scored. Nice productive outing, even though Cortland Sutton got none of it, which is obnoxious. But even without that game, even with that game, Knicks is still averaging 14.51 points on a per-game basis. That's not great. You're talking about a quarterback that I just told you had his first game with 20-plus points. He's still averaging 14.51. That means that all those other weeks have not been great. Now Knicks is taking on a Chargers team that is allowing 15.8 points on a per-game basis. I think that does not bode well for Mr. Knicks. I think we see a very pedestrian 13-point fantasy outing here, which I think even with the bye weeks, I think you can do better. Even 2 quarterback, unless you're really up against it, I think you can do better than Bo Nix in this one. Along with that, by the way, the Chargers are one of 6 defenses that have yet to allow an opposing quarterback to score 20 or more fantasy points. So you've got that track record of quarterbacks not being able to score 20-plus points. You've got the average points allowed. You've got the fact that even with that impressive outing that we finally saw last week, Knicks is still averaging 14.51 points on a per-game basis. If you're up against it, and if you think Bo Nix is the guy you need to start, maybe look a little bit harder, because I don't think you do. So with that said, let's get into our last quarterback, and it's Mr. Justin Fields. To me, the hourglass is fading on Mr. Justin Fields to be the starting quarterback of this team. For the first time this week in the entire NFL season, Russell Wilson was a full participant in practice, so he is on the way. Justin Fields is going to be going on the road to take up against the Raiders. I don't love this matchup. The Raiders are a dumpster fire. Yes, the Raiders are embarrassing for their quarterback and for how they're handling Devontae Adams, but even with the 34-point game that Justin Fields had at one point this year, he's still averaging 18.93 points. Even with a 35-point game. That's not good. You know what that means? That means he's giving you a lot of duds. throughout this early portion of the season. I don't love it. The Raiders also should be known. They're only allowing 18 rushing yards on a per game basis to quarterbacks. And for anybody looking at what the Raiders have done against the quarterbacks, you're thinking, okay, fine. He might not be able to throw a ton. Maybe he could run a bunch. But I just told you, 18 rushing yards on a per game basis. So if you're curbing his rushing floor or ceiling, whatever the hell you want to call it, curbing his rushing numbers, and if it's a bad matchup in general, what leads you to believe that Justin Fields has got to start? And I'll say this, and it's unfortunate, people are going to pull their hair out. Russell Wilson's going to be the starting quarterback in week 7. So this might be a bit of a swan song for old Justin Fields there, at least in terms of this NFL season, because I still believe Russell Wilson, once he's in there, will do just enough to keep the job. So again, these are my 3 quarterbacks to start. Caleb Williams, Kirk Cousins, Andy Dalton. My 3 to sit, Trevor Lawrence, Bo Nix, Justin Fields. Oddly enough, I went with 3 quarterbacks to start. They were in the NFC, 3 to sit. They were in the AFC. But be that as it may, I think those are the quarterbacks you need to play this week. Again, if you're up against it with the bye weeks, these might be names that you're looking towards. And I'll also tell you before we ride off into the sunset here, if you are looking for any help, because if you are up against it with bye weeks, if you are up against it with injuries, we know Nico Collins on the IR. We know there's a lot of injuries going around. Stick with this program. We're going to go live throughout the next 3 days, Thursday, Friday, Sunday. We're going to go live. We're going to answer your start sit questions, all of your fantasy football questions you might have. If you can orchestrate a trade and you need our advice, we got you covered there. So we go beyond the start sits. And by the way, I'll tell you one last thing. In the archives here, we have got videos out from one Anthony Servino going over the start sits for the running backs, for the wide receivers, for the tight ends. So go check all of that out, absorb it all, use it all to the best of your ability to crush your week 6. But until next time, stay thirsty, be kind to one another. We'll catch you guys on the flip side. Cheers.